So first I'm going to talk about grading. I'm not going to put a lot of detail into grading, other than to say, apparently I'm not going to get my spring break run out of the building and go crazy like I thought I would. Part of it's on me. Yesterday was International Women's Day according to Facebook. And I heard that from people. I don't look at Facebook, but I heard that from people, and I said, my wife spends so much time on Facebook. I was like, there's no way she doesn't know. So I cooked dinner yesterday because I felt like it was just a nice idea. No, it was actually spaghetti made with miniature bow tie noodles.
With olive oil in them.
I hate spaghetti noodles. I hate how messy they are.
Did you put olive oil in the... Okay.
And a teaspoon of salt, yep.
Good, good.
I also seasoned the ground meat as it was cooking with some salt, some peppers, some onion flakes, and onion powder.
That's how
She doesn't really like the cumin. She says it smells like a very...
I always said it cumin.
I can eat cumin by the spoon.
I always said it cumin.
You probably shouldn't do that. Do know that whenever you breathe out, if you eat a lot of cumin, you're going to have a breath that smells like either a feral hog or a very perspiring large individual.
It's worth it. And just brush your teeth afterwards.
It just doesn't do it. Once the old man's in there,
it's so
he's
worth
there
it.
to stay.
Wait, where do you get your cumin?
That's true. I do buy dried, non-fresh cumin.
Oh, okay. Okay. That makes sense.
Okay. Also last night, something else happened. But my wife has said that she doesn't like when I share that she watches the Kardashians. So what happened last night, she probably wouldn't want me sharing it all. So I'm just not going to share that. But suffice it to say, after that happened, it's related to the pregnancy. It's not a bad thing. It's fine. But I don't know into what detail I can go. So I'm just not going to. And then fell asleep after that. And I said, I'm just going to use that sleep. I'm just going to go ahead and go to bed. And I sat in my grading chair and went, oh, here we go. So I'm just going to, I slept last night instead so I could grade tonight because I'll have a fully open night tonight with nothing in the way. So, and today's not International Women's Day. It's not even Pancake Day, is it? Is it not? It's not Pancake Day.
Is it International Daughter's Day?
And by the way, guys, why did y'all not do me a solid on Tuesday and tell me it was International Free Pancake Day?
I didn't know.
Was it?
Dang.
Oh, I didn't do it until after it was over.
I don't think that
Exactly.
that's...
I missed it.
Yeah.
We all
missed it.
Raise your hand if you knew and you didn't tell us.
Apparently you weren't waiting hard enough. None of us were.
Facebook, man.
You know what I'm waiting for is like free pizza, International Pizza Day or something like that.
That exists, actually.
Because I don't really like pancake stuff. I wanted to, is everybody here last time? Was there nobody who missed?
Sad.
Yeah, I think, is there anybody who didn't get a chance to sign for the,
Everyone's
this? Yeah, I think everybody was here. So let's go ahead and move on to talking about the research paper now. Because that's what's coming up. That's what's going to occupy most of our time from now to the end. Well, with the exception of the poetry that we have left. Which I think we're usually, well, the way the weeks are going to work after spring break is we'll start by having the grade conference. Then the very next class, I'm probably going to talk in more detail about how to do the first step of the research assignment. And probably every Thursday from then on, I'll spend talking about some aspect of the research assignment so that you're getting some days to talk about that. And we'll also talk about the poetry of Frost, Dickinson, and that love song poem, that giant poem, somewhere in there as well. Because I've got basically, the Tuesdays will be poetry and Thursdays will be research stuff. So let's talk about the research assignment now. Because I haven't provided print copies, remember I talked about like we're not doing the print copies to kind of save some funds on printing, but I realize y'all aren't going to start with having a printout now. Y'all are going to start with going to Blackboard, getting the file, then looking at it that way. So I figured I'd do it the same way. I'm going to do log in as myself on Blackboard. In addition, I'm also going to log in as Magnus in another window. So that way you can see it both from your perspective and my perspective when we get to one part. So let's go as Magnus Baraka to 1302. That's us. by the way, anytime you have questions, go ahead and ask them today because, one, anytime you have a question, it's likely somebody else has that same question. Also, I'm recording every class, and I may, if I have good questions, for multiple classes, combine some of like the question stuff and edit it into my video. The degree to which I can promise I'll do that, though, is very low because it's a difficult prospect, and I have lots of grading to do as well. So that might not happen, but I would like the option to do that. Additionally, if you ask a question, that gives me a moment to take a drink because research assignment day takes a lot of voice. Just me saying a lot of things about research, and that can get dry on the throat. It's already kind of sore, if I had to be honest.
Throat is kind of sore.
So I gotta baby the throat, as we'll say, because apparently that's a phrase now. Assignments is where you'll go from here once you're on the page, and then you'll see Research Argumentation Essay Planning Assignment is the first thing that's popped up because that is the first step that you can do, so that's all I have up right now. What you'll see is two different file formats. You'll see the research paper assignment in docx format and in PDF. If you have an Apple computer or you have an iPhone, I know that if you have the iBooks app, that whenever you click a PDF link, you have the option, it'll say open in iBooks, and you can, and it'll pop it up in your iBooks app. And I believe it'll stay there at least until you get a new phone, or until once you get a new phone and you do an update from backup, it's one of the only things on your phone that will not back up for some reason, or previous downloaded iBooks Safari pages. I don't know why that's the case, but it'll stay there until you get a new phone. Rather than do the PDF today, I'm going to do the document format since that's what I'm most familiar with. My suggestion, for most of you, yours is just going to pop into the corner and say downloaded, but I have it set up to where it asks me every place I want. Every time I download something, I want to know where you want me to download it because I want to be able to put things where I want them. And so I would start a folder in documents called 1302 2017 Spring, maybe make a research paper for it, and then download it there. Then I would open it. So once I've opened the file, I'm going to go ahead and click Enable Editing, just because I don't like that yellow bar up there. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. But I will say that if you do enable editing, that's not going to give you any kind of special allowance. Like you're like, well, I did enable editing, so I could make some changes. And you're like, I'm like, why did you write a 788 word paper? And you're like, well, my file says it's only 750 word requirement. I'm like, what, did you change it? Yes, I did. That will not work for you. You will have to go by my rules and not your own rules. So that will not change anything there. But you can do things like highlight due dates if you want to do that, on the home page, and then save that on your own. But you don't have to. Oh wait, I just hit it twice. That's not going to make it go away. All right, so here we go. Let's start with the steps, then we'll go into some of those steps in more detail. The planning assignments due week 10, day 2 by 11:59 p.m. The essay itself is due week 12, day 2, and the presentation over the research is due on week 15, days 1 and 2. So week 10, day 2 is technically 3 weeks from today. In a normal semester, it would be 2 weeks from today. But because we have spring break in the middle, it's 3. So you actually have 3 weeks from today to turn in the first step of the research assignment. And it's literally just your thesis and your works cited page, which I'll get more into. That's very simple. The essay itself is due 2 weeks after that. Now, what I have not included here is between those 2 weeks where you normally would have turned in an annotated bibliography if you've had me before. Instead, you're turning a synthesis analysis essay in on poetry. One poem, by the way, not multiple poems. So you'll need to find... My suggestion is before you start doing your research, maybe when you come back after spring break, quickly crank out a synthesis analysis paper on a poem. Because you've done 2 of those, by now they're kind of probably old hat and pretty simple. It's like an expanded discussion post. It's just opinion and how you feel and that kind of stuff. So I don't think it's going to be that difficult for you to do. Then you can start going completely into research. Otherwise, week 11, day 2 comes around, you're midway through your research, and all of a sudden you got to switch gears to a poetry essay and then come back to your research paper, which could be difficult, but chances are 90% of you will do that since I have the week 11, day 2 requirement. You're like, oh, well, that's when it's getting done. And I understand that fully as a former student myself. I'll always be a student of the world. That was meant to sound really compelling, but it's not as compelling as I thought. So this assignment's composed of the following 7 steps. Probably the toughest step is choose a literary reading and real-world applicability focus. What? I abbreviate that to RWAF. So you'll hear me say RWAF sometimes, real-world applicability focus. Once you've got those things, you'll do the planning assignment, which I said is nothing but a works cited and a thesis. You'll submit that to me for approval. Once I've approved it, you'll start writing your research paper. On week 12, day 2, we'll have our only peer review that we have. It counts as 4 in-class discussion grades. So important to do that. Then the essays due that night, week 12, day 2. I'll turn it back to you sometime between the day that it's due and then week 14, day 1 or 2. You'll revise it by week 14, day 1 or 2. And then we'll have presentations the week after that, week 15, days 1 and 2. Now, I will mention that, technically speaking right now, week 16, day 2 is the day the baby's due. So this semester especially, it's important to get papers in on time, because it may be a situation where if you turn in something late, I'm indemnified of having to grade it. If it's 3 days late, you would have already gotten low enough that you've automatically failed the essay based on what I say in my syllabus. So to turn in something late near the end when you know I got a baby coming, that's kind of risky. And babies sometimes are born early. So that may significantly cut into my free time to make allowances for the lazy. So just make sure that you're not the lazy this semester. You're working hard right near the end, because you know the baby's coming. We don't know when. It could be any moment, though May 9th is when they tell us. If it's born week 15, I'll find a way to arrange all the presentations to be recorded in class so that I could then grade them from a video later. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. Oh, we could set up a computer and Skype every one of my classes where I'm just watching people present from the back.
That'd be fun.
That would be interesting. Of course, that would require us to have internet connections here that could run Skype, and I don't know that they can. I'm assuming they can run it, at least temporarily. Just add a webcam to this, and it'll be pointing it. And I'm like, hey, guys. Look, the monitor moved when I'm talking. Let's see. Steps 2, 4, and 6 are on Blackboard, so the planning, the paper, and the revisions. Format's the same as before. Be advised, though, third person only on this paper, so the census analysis are on first person. This one's in third. Be objective, from the outside. The grading works like this. The entirety of the research assignments were 600 points, or 30% of the class, so not as much as in my 1301 class. The peer review is worth 4 in-class discussion grades. The research argumentation essay planning and presentation are 200, or 10% of the class, and the essay itself is 400, or 20% of the class. Now, because it's the culmination of all you've learned, and we've kind of talked about this semester, to aid in your success, there's a few steps in this research process. We'll have conferences to talk about your current class grade, and you can ask about your paper topic during that time as well. Then you'll submit your thesis and sources for approval to make sure that it's okay. Just FYI, if you copy and paste your paper from the internet at the last minute, you've got a 0% success rate in my class, and you'll get an instant 0 for plagiarism. So just follow the steps. It's much easier. But I don't know that you could copy-paste this essay from the internet. I really don't. I don't think anybody else is writing these. I think we're like the only people who do. Not research papers in general. Those happen all the time. But my particular assignment, I really don't think a lot of people are doing. I want to go over to this real quick, and I'll probably have to design part of it in front of you. But I came up with this for my English 1301 class this morning, and then I came up with a 1302 version as well. But I came up with this thing that I realized my gradebook is really complicated, but yours could be really easy. Where what I've done is, people were saying, well, what does my essay average have to be to get, the final exam exemption? Because you're going to have an 80 on your essay's average in order to get that final exam exemption. And so I figured out, let me just put in their grades. And let's just say I put in these mythical grades. And it would tell them they have this essay average, because I've got this long, complicated formula up here that tells you to calculate based on these forms. And then down below, I've got these additional grades, because they said, well, what about the rest of our grades to calculate our average? And I was like, well, that's just this stuff. And you could calculate your final average based on that. So I thought I might actually do the same for the 1302 classes. But I need you guys to tell me, what are the other things your discussion, in-class discussion grades,
The lab.
discussion posts, quizzes, labs, planning presentation of the research paper. I'll just put here, research plan pres. The attendance is only punitive. It only ever has a punitive effect. It doesn't have its own. Basically, the in-class discussion is your showing up grade. Is that it? We don't have peer reviews except for that one, and that counts as something else. I don't know. We'll check it out. So this is the form I have for calculating the average, the essay average. Let me just go down here, and maybe I can, how did I do it up here? Let me see, I wrote final average below. I could add this. Let me see, we need to add the different fields. So we have C25. How much in-class discussion grade? Is that 5%, I assume? Anybody got access to a syllabus? You're like, nope, don't have my phone or Blackboard. Discussion posts, or did I say those are 5 or 10%? Those are still 10%, aren't they? C26 times 0.1. C27 times 0.1. See, I've already got this in my grade book, but I'm thinking about like what y'all would want. C28 times 0.15. And C28 times 0.1. Does that all add up to 1? Let's see. 5 plus 10 is 15 plus 5 is 20 plus 5 is 25 plus 20 is 45 plus 5 is 50 plus 1 is 60 plus 1 is 70 plus 15 is 85 plus 1 is 95. Am I missing something?
5.
Yeah. Good job. The question is,
Maybe the attendance is, or
no.
those is 10.
Here, we'll do this. I'll just look up the syllabus real quick, because I want to see if there's any other element that I'm not considering. Oh, the final exam. Okay, so then we have the final exam. I'm going to put if exempt here, and then down below I'm going to put final exam if not exempt, because they differ based on the field. So let me add that to this real quick. So we're going to have final exam. I should just change from if exempt to not exempt. I'll explain in a minute. Let's see, C30 times 0.05, because it accounts for 5% of your final grade. Then I can get rid of this whole slash here, and at the beginning add an equal sign there. So we were experimenting with this earlier, because we want to know, like, how do I calculate like my essay average to figure out if I'm exempt from the final. And let's just take these grades and get rid of them and be like, okay, so this field right here will calculate. In fact, let me just real quick, just so we can, I don't know, it makes me feel better. Put these little column headings, then I can scroll back down. So let's say, you know, synthesis analysis, we got that down pretty well. So let's say we got like a 93 on the first one, then like a 95 on the second one, 95 on the third. Critical evaluation, that was kind of tough for you. So you got a 72 on that one.
Oh, man.
And now you're trying to figure out, what do I need in the research paper to get the essay average of an 80 or 79.5 in order to make myself exempt on the final? Well, I can just start typing in numbers based on this formula. 82 is way too high. I don't have to have that. 76, I could go even lower. 74, I can even go lower than that. 72.
Ooh.
Oh, almost there, but not quite. Maybe if I revise my essay 1 to a 95. Done. So with this like little file that I've made, first of all, I want to know, do y'all want this available to you? Where you just plug numbers in and you...
That's pretty cool.
No.
Spreadsheet that you...
It's just this, yeah. Just you would change the numbers here and it would calculate it for you. What now?
I said, this is way too much math for me, right?
Where do you plug the formula in? How are you doing it?
The formula is here. So it says, if you remember BCIS from high school, which do they do it in homeschool? No BCIS. Oh, that's bad.
I remember that.
It was like 6 straight months of hellacious, here's everything with Microsoft Office you never knew how to do and never thought you'd need to. I learned how to do all this. So equals sum of C19 times 0.05, C20 times 0.1, C21 times 0.05, C22 times 0.05, C23 times 0.2 divided by 0.45.
You lost me.
Yep. Which is why I'm starting to understand that y'all don't know how to do this stuff, so I should just learn how to do it. So here's the essay titles here. And then this right here then, because what I've done is multiplied each one of these essay fields by its percentage weight in the class, and then divided.
The C number is the column.
Yeah, it's the column
okay.
designation. So if you actually look, when I highlight this right here, it'll show each one of the fields that's included.
Okay.
So each one of these right here is a field that's included in that formula. And I divide it by 45 because that's what percentage all these grades are. So I can give them their original weight, but then just divide by 45 to determine.
So you're getting the average.
Yeah, I'm just essentially taking the average. Now down below, what I can do is I've got this other field I've created that will do the full average for the whole class. And you see it shows like a 35 right now instead of the choice little 79.67 that the other one has. But that's because I haven't put the in-class discussion. Almost everybody will get 100 on in-class discussion. It'd be very hard not to. Discussion posts, assuming you've done them all that you need to do, you should have 100. And with the, I can't show achievements on here, you'll know if you got the achievement. So you'll have to remember, okay, I get 5 drops on that. Additionally, with the quizzes, you'll just have to know if you got 5 drops. All I can tell you to do here is to put in your quiz column average, because on Blackboard it says quiz average, I think, or total quiz grade, or something like that. You need to take that and put it in here. Let's say you did pretty well. You got like a 100, a 90, an 80, a 70, and a 60. So that would average out to an 80, or your highest ones. And so you have an 80 quiz grade. Your labs, crap, I gotta go look up something on my main. So this guy, I think, because as a result of that, he probably gets 100 on his labs. Now the planning and presentation, generally speaking, people get 100 on that too, because it's basically the presentation. It's also basically a very easy grade to get. So he's also going to get 100 on that. Now the final exam field, I actually made that up here, was, I have to like kind of modify this with different numbers. I did this an if-then statement, which is if D19 is greater than 79.49, then use D19, but if not, use C32. And now I got to put the equal sign. Okay. So what this will do is, let's make the decimals smaller. So what this will do is this field right here, the final exam field, if you've got an average, let's say like you get a 65 on your research paper, right? Well, then that shows your essay average is 76.56. And if that's the case, your final exam is not exempt, so it shows a 0 right here. I need to change that to final exam and just that's your final exam grade. So if you've done the whole semester and that's what you end up with, you're going to go, oh, I don't have a final exam grade there. I need to actually still calculate what will happen once I get my real final exam in. So you come to your final exam, you write the final exam, you get a 75, and watch this average over here. So right now you have an 82 before the final exam. If you take the final exam and you write it without revising anything above, that makes your final average an 86.2. Because it uses your final exam, if you're not exempt, that you have to write by hand as that grade. But you may not want to come and do that. You may want to be like, shoot, I'm just going to revise this research paper. Let's see if I can get like 10 more points in this bad boy. Boom, got it. Nice. And so now I've gone from I got an 81 on my final exam too, because that bumped me up to an 81 on my essay average, which is an 88.5, which, I don't know, this is maybe a little known fact. I'll actually round an 88.5 up to an 89, which rounds to an A. And if you got the achievement too, you have 87, then that would also round to an A, or 88. So this person would actually have an A, whereas before, if they didn't revise the research paper, they had a B. But if you want, if y'all email me to remind me, I will provide this file to you, and you can just start plugging your own numbers in there, so it'll tell you what you're making. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Now, don't you dare, any of you, when I provide this file for you, then I don't have to, go to one of my superiors at some point and say, his little gradebook file said that I was going to make this, and I didn't. And he had 2 grade conferences with me, and he told me how to calculate the grade myself, but when I misused his file, it told me the wrong thing. Because I don't want to have that conversation. This is right. As long as you follow it, it'll work. But don't you dare, like, change my average file and then say it's his fault. I can, if this happens once, I'm never doing this again. And I'll save that here in a little bit, and then if somebody emails me, I'll actually upload it. I'll make a more cleaner. It's just actually a pretty clean version in itself. It's not that difficult to look at. But I'll try to clean it up for just 1302 and just 1301, depending on the class, and put that on Blackboard. Now let's get back to the research, because that's important. Let's talk about step 1 of the process. Step 1 is, I think, technically the most difficult part of the process. Research planning is probably a close second, and then the 5-page paper itself, that's not that bad. Here's what you're going to do. Choose a literary reading. Okay, done that before, no big deal. And a real-world applicability focus. I'm curious. What is that? And you'll find 5 total articles of research. Okay. Let's talk about the literary reading first. So you're going to choose a literary reading and find some academic journal articles on it. You'll need to choose one of the assigned green literary readings from the book syllabus, or syllabus, to write a research argumentation essay about. This will need to be a literary reading that can be searched in the Academic Search Complete database to find at least 1 or 2 scholarly literary articles about your literary reading, or its author if the choices are scant. And what I mean by that is, let me read the next sentence. You're certainly welcome to choose your topic based on which one nets the most search results in the Academic Search Complete database. However, that's fairly unnecessary, since you only need to find 1 to 2 articles of this type. It may be easy to search for some type of article, like you can't actually write your paper over Minister's Black Veil because it's the sample paper. But if I had got on and searched Minister's Black Veil and Academic Search Complete, I'd have no problem. And the reason is because there's all kinds of articles written about that paper, or that story. However, if I got on and I wanted to search up Andre Dubus killings, I mean, you've got a couple of difficulties there. You're searching a story called Killings, which I'm sure that's all kinds of articles are written about just killings in general. So you have to find a way to separate that. And you're like, okay, but mine's about Andre Dubus. And so you type Andre Dubus in there. Turns out he's one of those difficult people because his son also became a writer. Guess what his name is? Andre Dubus III. So you're going to be, and he's actually more a popular money-making writer than his father was. So you'll probably find more articles written about him than you will about his dad. And And of all those articles you find on there, none of them will be written about killings. I can verify for that for you right now. In that case, you're permitted to do just the author's work in general. So you could find an article written on Andre Dubus's writings and talk about relevant aspects of his style or subject matters that he liked to write about. Like you were wanting to write a paper about how killings relates to some family issue. And you say, well, I can't find anything about killing specifically, but it does say that he commonly deals with domestic issues in his writings. So you can use that from the research that you have for your paper, even though you don't have an article specifically about killings. And these difficulties will vary from author to author. Like sometimes with the poetry, you won't find any articles on a poem, but you'll find plenty on a poet. Or on Battle Royal, you might not find any articles on it because it's the first chapter of The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, which there's going to be lots of articles on. But they won't always be dealing with the exact part of that novel that you are, because you're only writing about the first chapter. And most people getting scholarly articles published aren't going to say, yeah, I read the first chapter of this book. It was really good. I want to write an article on it. Like they're going to be expected to have read the entire 500-page novel. And it's just one of those things. So you might have some difficulty finding stuff that applies directly to the story you're writing, but you can be a little fluid with your searching. And you only have to have 1 or 2 articles about that anyway, so that's not as big a deal. However, you have to have a real-world applicability focus. And in parentheses, I've put that that's basically a modern news event involved with a current political or moral issue in the world today that has not been solved, or at least is currently ongoing. Now, this research assignment's a bit different than a regular literary research assignment for a literature course. In addition to scholarly literary articles, you must have 3 to 4 academic journal and news articles from the Opposing Viewpoints Resource Center database and or the Academic Search Complete database. These articles should be perspectives and knowledge on a modern-day, real-world situation or problem with some degree of controversy or a moral ethical conundrum. Now, once you've got the set of articles about literature and the set of articles about some real-world issue, how are we going to use those? Well, the purpose of this research argumentation essay, or the idea that your thesis will address, will be to apply the thematic discoveries from analyzing one of our literary readings to provide perspective on a real-world situation. A thesis for such a paper might look like this. In Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, Willy Loman's distortion of the American dream mirrors the American government's indecision regarding degrees of constitutional privacy during the Edward Snowden scandal. Yeah? You like it?
Yeah.
So basically what this is, and I'll explain this reference here. I think the Minister's Blackfield sample paper later will be a little easier to understand than my little example here, but I still want to do both. That way you get the broadest scope of possibilities. Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, I'm going to spoil for you. Sorry. But it's a play about a salesman, door-to-door salesman. He assumes that at some point he's going to keep making more and more money and move up in the company and maybe become a part owner, and he'll make it in the world, the American dream. Work hard, work hard, work hard, and then you're in charge. The world is yours. Starts to kind of over time realize that's not going to happen for him. I don't know if he's just not good at his job or people don't like him or what. Starts doing the kind of things he will do when they go into crisis, gets depressed, cheats on his wife. In the end, he's so depressed he decides to get into a car wreck and die so he can leave the insurance money to his family. And as far as I know, I might be remembering this incorrectly, but I could have sworn that they realized he killed himself, so they didn't get the insurance money. How fun! But she did end up actually paying. His wife ended up paying the house off, and the play ends on her, talking to her husband's gravesite, and how we just paid the house off, honey. It's really heart-wrenching and sad. The whole play is. Now, the Edward Snowden scandal. I don't know if y'all remember this. About 5 years ago, Edward Snowden became a whistleblower against the, I believe, CSI or NSA, the CIA or NSA, saying that basically in the position that he was in, where he was working, he could look at not just people without a warrant. He could go and look at the emails, the phone calls, the texts of anybody. There was really it was unchecked power of surveillance. And that if he wanted to, I believe he said he could have just read the email of Obama read Obama's personal email if he wanted to, or even like his state email. And he said that was problematic, and if you think that you're exempt from that, I mean, think about how many times you've said, think about it even just jokingly, you said, oh, I could totally kill you right now. You're such a jerk. Taken out of context, that says, oh, he claimed he would kill somebody. And all kinds of things we say on a regular basis. Think about how sarcastic you are on a daily basis. And whether that could end up being turned against you later. Like, they can pick pieces out of what you say and twist it against you. People don't realize that. They say, I don't do anything wrong. I don't have anything to worry about. You do. Everybody does. Just depends on if they want you to be the bad guy, they can make you. So, in this situation, what was the government's response? They were like, what? They said, it's okay, our bad. We won't do this as much anymore. We've recognized it as kind of a violation of privacy for American citizens, right? No. They said, that guy's a traitor, treason. He had to go into hiding. He's now in Russia, hiding, so they can't extradite to the U.S. And the United States was like, no, we have to do this. And he's wrong. Kind of married themselves to that idea. They doubled down, as you would say. What, blackjack? Poker? I don't know. Craps? Lottery? Parcheesi? Something like that. I haven't even heard that game's mentioned in years. I don't even know where that came from. Never played it. Never seen it. Don't even know what it consists of.
Really.
Maybe it's just because I'm hungry and I thought of cheese. So, if we take those two examples I just gave, as you can see, you can be very creative with the relationships you create between the literary source material and the thesis you ultimately devise, which applies to the real-world situation. For instance, Willy Loman is a man who will not accept the reality of his situation and vehemently denies that he may not become a success. When he realizes he has not been and will not become a success, he commits suicide, which could mirror a possible future for the U.S. when the fallout of the NSA scandal occurs. Like, what would happen? Like, could the government commit suicide? What would it do? The U.S. may realize that its stubborn stronghold on civilian surveillance is one of the major international blunders of the 21st century, but at a point when it's too late to apologize or repair the situation. In what situation will the U.S. be then? It's best to prevent such a scenario. Yes, Willy Loman is an individual man, and the U.S. government is a large entity, but the relationships that each have to their own ideologies can be shown parallel. It is creative. It's a stretch. It's a dreadfully interesting prospect for a research paper. Now, will it be difficult? Probably. Will you spend more time finding your 5 total pieces of research than writing the paper? Possibly. Will you feel accomplished and intelligent at the end? Yes. Yes, you will. Also, did I mention this in class today? I don't know if I did, but this assignment, since I don't see it I've never seen anybody else doing this before, any other college or any teacher. I really think this would be a great example of a sample writing if you went to a college. Most of what they're going to be getting in from students is this: the veil is a symbol in the minister's black veil. The birthmark is a symbol in the birthmark. That's what they're going to be getting in terms of their sample writings. You're going to be saying, I think we can make this piece of literature matter in the context of today's world issues. They're going to be like, whoa, what is this? Genius kid. Whereas really half the genius goes to me because I'm the one who but depending on how well you make your case and how nice a connection you make, I mean, that could really impress whoever you end up. I think I have a lot of students here who always tell me they want to go to Baylor. And some of the students who want to go to Baylor, I imagine they might want to see a sample writing, and especially if you go to a grad program somewhere, they're going to want to see samples of your writing. Now, as a result of this, I don't want you choosing the Occupy Wall Street movement to compare with Bartleby, because there are already articles written about that out there. But for the most part, academic journals aren't written about things in the real world relating to literature, which I think is a travesty. You'd think that that's kind of the point. And Minister's Black Veil by Hawthorne is something I don't want you to do either, unless you specifically approve a non-related topic to Minister's Black Veil that's different from the sample paper before week 10, day 2, which is when the planning is due. So I'd want to know that you plan on doing Minister's Black Veil going in, to be prepared that you're going to try to give me a thesis that's way different, but about that story. So don't at 11 p.m. on planning night send me a thesis with Minister's Black Veil and say, hey, can I do this? That's not this. I want to know way ahead of time. And by the way, I guess I have a problem with the purely formalist approach to literature. That's why I've started doing this. Because after reading so many papers my first year of teaching, and I was like, oh my gosh, symbolism, 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 so sick of this symbolism papers over and over again on research papers. Like, we got to research to find out the veil's a symbol? Come on. That's obvious. And so I thought, well, how is this going to matter to the real world? And I went, that's the paper. Write that. So that's how I came out. I really want the people to think, like, how does the stuff we've been doing all semester going to matter to our conception of the world? And if you think that it doesn't, it does. Regardless of how you think about his politics, or any of their politics, most presidents generally do some reading during their time in office, and a lot of them have favorite books, and they constantly will reread their favorite books. I can't remember the ones more recent or previous to Obama, but I do know that Obama was quite well read as a president. And does anybody know that one way in reading and writing that Obama has distinguished himself from any president before? There's something he's done that no other president's ever done.
Does he write his own speeches?
That's pretty close. He did write something. He's the only sitting president to publish an academic journal to a scholarly peer-reviewed journal while he was in office. No other president has done that before.
What do you write about?
I don't know. I didn't read that far. Or I've forgotten the title since. I read about it when it happened, and that was probably 2-3 years ago. Actually, it might have been just a year before the end of his presidency, so it could have been just 2 years ago. So even the leaders of the free world, they recognize the need for literature and how it helps them govern in some way. But so they feel like there's a tangible effect. But I'm wanting it to be in a smaller way, if just a story or a poem, you talking to me about how you think the literature we're dealing with can have a tangible effect. And we got to be doing this kind of thinking, y'all. I mean, we're looking at a future where I think this is depressing. Should I say this on video? I'll go ahead. I read an article the other day that postulated that the millennial generation will be the first generation to lose most of its jobs to automation.
That is depressing.
Yes, isn't it?
That's why I'm not going into engineering.
The best solution I've heard so far, which it's pretty clever, a lot of people are saying universal basic income, which might be a necessity. It's something that a lot of people don't agree with just on the ground. Like, you should have to work for your but if there are no jobs, how do you work? But another person, Bill Gates, said, well, then every robot that's used as a form of automation should be taxed, so that at least in some way money is coming still in. And granted, we don't usually like taxes, but if nobody has jobs and nobody has money, what else are we going to do?
You're going to pay less in taxes to the robot than you would if...
Yeah, you'd still pay less taxes than you would to the human. So I mean, it's gonna be better for the companies no matter what. But imagine if half the people lose their careers based on automation. That would be terrifying. And then what will we don't have a model for that. We have no sustainable economic model for if half the people lose their jobs, what happens? And that just means half that generation, not half of everybody. So you don't have to be that scared. But suddenly the humanities are going to matter a lot more. Oh, wait, what? What did you say? Math and science can be done by computers? What? Guess I better learn history. Why did I not say English? Like, I was so set up perfectly. I know, and I was like, history. So weird. So that's going to be probably pretty difficult to come up with, is the really figuring out, and probably it's going to be best to think synthesis analysis wise and maybe critical evaluation wise a little bit, like, which piece of literature did you really connect with the most? And you felt like, usually if you connected with it the most, you feel like it had some applicability to your life and you could have use for it in some way, or you connected with it because there was something in it that's important to you. And if that's the case, start looking at real world events to figure out, okay, what's going on in the world that I could relate to this? I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple minutes, but I think there's some approaches to that. Next, you'd have the planning due. So what that consists of is 2 parts. A works cited page, and that's just a list of sources you plan to use in your paper that's subject to change. You'll upload that to Blackboard, properly formatted as a document uploaded, just like you would an essay. And then the thesis proposal, and that's the thesis you plan to prove in your paper. Type this directly into the comments box when you submit your works cited page. So some people, you're welcome to have it pasted to the end of your works cited document, those who've done that for me before. But the only place I really need it to be is in the comments box, not the submission box, but the comments box when you submit your works cited page. It's just got to be a tentative one, the works cited page. You need to have completed, you need to gather 1 to 2 literary source articles, 3 to 4 real-world applicability-focused articles, and then I also want you to have a 6th citation that is your literary reading from the textbook. So your works cited page should have a total of 6 citations, 5 being articles that you found. The thesis proposal, it's just the thesis you plan to prove, so it's that same one I mentioned earlier in the Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, American Dream is related to the constitutional privacy problem. Now with your thesis, essentially, your thesis should try to prove a point about how the modern news event or real-world political or moral issue could be helped or improved if the themes and meanings of literary reading were absorbed. Basically, you're trying to show that if the world were to pay attention to the lessons that could be learned from literary reading, then the world could be improved. So your goal is somewhat to find a way to make the literature matter to the world. Find a way to make this piece of literature matter to the world by helping solve a problem. And the way I grade it is this. I'm actually going to show you if somebody submitted it the way I would approach grading it. So I'm going to have him go to assignments. I'm going to have him click the assignment. And when I say him, it's Magnus Baraka. And you can look here and see that he has gone to Start New. He's hit Browse My Computer. He's found the works cited that he wants to submit. He's checked the box, and he's typed his thesis into this comment box right here below. And what happened was he ended up submitting this. And you can see it's a works cited page, and if I zoom in on that by zooming out on this, you might be able to see, but here we have Social Inclusion Journal, Critique, Columbia Journal of Gender and Law, Duke Journal of Gender and Law, authors for each one. What's the one below? American Criminal Law Review. So I've got a number of different journals. I have the textbook cited as a source with Raymond Carver's Popular Mechanics. So I've got 5 articles at least, and I've got one on Popular Mechanics. Do I have one about Raymond Carver stuff? Yes, there's one on literature right there from a journal called Critique. So I've got some on the literature, some on the real world issue. I've got the textbook itself. Good job. Then I have the thesis here, and this is actually the sample paper thesis. But let's say that Nichols goes and he grades it. This is what he gives it. He gives it a 5. And I probably wouldn't give that one that I just saw a 5. I'm just giving an example of a grade I would give and what I would say. And this is, if you go to your assignments page or grades page and you click the assignment research paper planning, this is what you'll see. You'll see your original submission, your comments, which is the thesis, and then below you'll see the feedback to the learner, which is my feedback to you. And it says, a couple of your articles seem like they aren't credible enough from literary sources. I said not to use the Bloom database, and I can tell you use the Bloom database. Additionally, your thesis doesn't clarify in what way the story is related to the real-world issue, and that's a big one. You got to show the relationship. So on a grade like that, I might give them a 5. And what does that mean? If you receive a 10 or a 9, go ahead and proceed with your essay. Anything 8 or below requires a revision before moving forward with the essay. Now, if you get a 10, that means that I assume the highest grade you'll receive with your current thesis and works cited would be 100. If you get a 9, it means I assume you'll get somewhere in the 90s. And the problem with the 8 or below is if I think you get an 8, I think you'll get in the 80s, if it's 7 in the 70s, so on and forth. If you give a 1, I assume you'll get somewhere in the teens on your research paper. Now that's worth a lot of your grades, so I really don't want that. So I prefer if anybody has an 8 or below, go ahead and revise it, resubmit it, so you can make sure you're on track to get a 90 or 100. Because otherwise I think that still there's significant problems that exist with your proposal and need work. Then we'll have a peer review on week 12, day 2. Well, actually, there's an invisible step here, step 2.5. Don't forget to submit your synthesis analysis essay 3 on poetry. Then we have a peer review on week 12, day 2. That night you'll turn in your paper. It's really just continue the idea of the thesis. So you've connected the literature to the real world situation, and you've written a paper on it, arguing that point throughout different aspects of the real world situation and the literature that help prove that point you're trying to make. And needs to be 1,250 words. So I'll do what you guys do. There you go. Highlighted the word count.
151.
Yeah, you're like, not this right here. I don't even know what that number is. It's bigger, so I don't like it. And what you need to do on this paper is organize it exceedingly well, have a clear thesis, use at least 5 sources, and cite the textbook as a 6th. All this paragraph really here says is anytime you're mentioning anything in the paper, make sure it's trying to advance that thesis. Every single paragraph, every single sentence needs to advance the point you're trying to prove about the relationship between literature and the real world situation. Now with the research paper, when you submit it, don't submit your works cited separately, paste it to the end of your paper. In fact, if you don't have your works cited and your internal citation on the same document, then I'll give you a 0 and I'll ask you to resubmit with that stuff. So don't get in a hurry and turn it in before you've checked to make all your research, make sure research is there, because I will kick it back and say I need you to submit it with it. I have pre-planned paragraphs that I just copy paste when you're missing one or the other or both, and I say you forgot to include a works cited. Please do that before I can grade. You forgot to include the internal citation. Please do that. Sometimes I say I can only tell that you've internally cited 3 of your articles. Please turn it in again before I'll grade it. So any of those situations you don't want to be in, so just make sure that you've got both your works cited and internal citation.
You need to cite every article that you have that you've included.
Up to 5. Like you have to cite the main source, so your story, and the 5 articles you chose. You can do additional ones and not cite them, but I'd still prefer they be cited too. But there's got to be at least 5. Because, and I'll show you how I actually approach grading an essay in just a minute to kind of help show you why that's important. Now when I grade the paper, actually start reading it, I want to make sure it has a clear thesis, that you support the thesis through convincing argument. You support the argument through adequate and appropriate use of sources. You have a complete works cited page in Emily style. You have internal citation. You correctly cite your 5 sources and the primary source, which is the book, and satisfy the length. This does count 20%. Now here's my hint. Try to develop an original viewpoint and relationship between your literary reading and modern day situation that you think hardly anyone has ever conceived of. Also, try to avoid going for easy relationships, like the relationship between Story of an Hour and modern day feminism, which is a bit too obvious and kind of more broad. If you're more specific, it'll work. So you may say, well, look at the way that, because I mean, literally Story of an Hour, if you think about it, is dealing with feminism in a way. So if you talk about modern day feminism, they're still dealing with the same kind of stuff. But if you say Story of an Hour and the current move to defund Planned Parenthood, if you think about that, that's kind of a women's rights issue, which relates to Story of an Hour a little bit. You could also do Story of an Hour and the glass ceiling. Somebody heard of the glass ceiling? It's this invisible ceiling at which women cannot pass in employment. So, like, for whatever reason, still, women are underrepresented in areas like being company CEOs. They don't run a lot of companies. And why is that? And so that could be a direction that you go as well. But always try to relate it to something specific that also maybe deals with feminism. Has anybody had a chance to see the movie Get Out? Has anybody heard of the movie Get Out?
Heard of the picture.
Jordan Peele, who is the second half of Key and Peele, it's the first movie he's ever directed, and he has said that he compares it to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, the old, oh my gosh, Sidney Poitier movie, the horror version of that. An old Guess Who's Coming to Dinner movie was basically like a white family with a white daughter who brought home a black boyfriend, and it was a movie made in like the 60s. And they were like mortified that their daughter brought home a black boyfriend. And so he said that he's done that kind of for the modern day with a horror element. So it's this white family, and they've got a white daughter, and she brings home a black boyfriend. And he said that it's a little different these days. Jordan Peele did. He said people have watched his movie, and they've said, is that really what it feels like to be a black person and around white people? And he says, yes, it does. And then they said immediately after, well, we don't really say things like that, do we? Talking about the white people in the film. And he says, yes, you do. Because Jordan Peele has a white wife and he has a white mom. So he's around white people a lot. And he says that there's just this epidemic of, as he quotes, well-meaning white people. Like, they try to be nice. They just ultimately say really horrible things all the time and don't realize it. And so you might take a movie like that, and I wouldn't want you to relate it to problems today of racism, because that's too broad and open. But if you said, well, let's talk about Get Out, the movie that deals with race and relationships, and compare that to the Black Lives Matter movement, because that's an issue that's dealing with race on a larger scale, and not necessarily like on a relationship with a boyfriend-girlfriend scale. So you're always trying to find a way to relate it to something big that's going on news-wise. Now, what this will require you to do is become knowledgeable at what's happening in the world, which is kind of important as a human being. I know it's tempting to just go to Facebook and stay there and look at the cat. Look at all these people falling down. This is hilarious. Or whatever you do in your life that avoids looking at the world. But it's important that we know things. And if you're having trouble thinking about anything that's going on in the world, one thing you can do is go to our databases. And this is actually referenced, I think. Well, if it's not referenced, here it is. Go to the main website. Go to Quick Links. Go to Library Services. Scroll down to Off-Campus Databases. You'll have to log in here with your student ID and password, but for me it's already logged in. And you'll need to, if you have no idea, instead of going straight to Academic Search Complete, maybe you scroll down to Opposing Viewpoints Resource Center. And just maybe look at some things that are going on in the world. Go to Browse Issues and look at current issues in the world. All kinds of things are happening in the world that you could become knowledgeable about. Maybe you could start here. Find some information, like issues that you didn't realize were big issues in the world. Like, what are designer babies? What does that even mean? And you realize it's like babies that are genetically engineered to have certain traits. Like if you want your baby to be born with blonde hair, sometimes people can modify the genes of their children to have them born with blonde hair. And do you have that? Huh?
So theoretically early enough, you could actually choose the sex of the baby.
Yeah, choosing the sex of the baby, which is a thing I think people can do. And so that's like essentially giving you authority to design. It's kind of like, a lot of people view it as like you're playing God. But also maybe God gave you the tools by which you could play. Like, so who knows? But you might find that to be a really big issue. And like, how could I relate that to one of the stories? Because that's something that's now important to me that I didn't realize was even a thing. So you could start here, look for some issues, and also maybe have an idea of your favorite stories that you read, and then be thinking as you look at every one of these issues, how could I relate that? And that might be a good approach to get you started. Let me go back over here to the assignment again. My biggest hint, I think, though, is that you need to make some compelling observation regarding the importance of the relationship you've discovered. In other words, don't allow the paper to become a simple comparison contrast, like, wow, look how Get Out is like racism, or look how Get Out is like Black Lives Matter. Explore what possibilities for future behavior and societal, individual, political decisions exist now that the relationship's been realized. So once you've looked at the relationship, say, this needs to solve this somehow, or these people could look at this and figure out what to do based on the literature.
So try to give like a solution to the problem.
Yeah, kind of say in what way this literature could help solve this problem. Then I'll grade the papers and return them. Then you'll revise them. You'll have a presentation. I'll go over that in more detail later. But essentially, it's going to be 2 to 3 minute presentation where 2 people have to ask you a question. But what you're going to do is say how you decide on your topic, state your thesis, and then take people through the main points of your argument very briefly. Now, I do want to show you, probably the last thing we're going to do today is I'll talk about for you real quick how this guy approached his paper and how probably most of you are going to. He deals first with having a paragraph that kind of talks about how hypocrisy is a problem in the world today. So he starts with his problem that's inherent in both. Then what he does is he gives a paragraph summarizing the minister's black fail. Then he gives a paragraph summarizing who the Westboro Baptist Church is and what they do. And then he has this sentence right here. It says, Hawthorne's portrayal of the hypocritical townsfolk in the minister's black veil is nearly identical to the protests of the Westboro Baptist Church in a sense that both claim a profound level of morality, yet only notice when others around them commit sin and never themselves. So he's relating minister's black veil, the townsfolk there, to the Westboro Baptist Church and the people who hold up the signs that say God hates fags at military funerals, just like Jesus would do. Sarcastically, I say this. And then says that both people are showing a huge level of hypocrisy. Now, what does this sentence look like to you? What would you generally say this sentence is in an essay? The thesis, right? However, look, when does a thesis usually happen? More specifically? End of the intro. And I like the way you say end of the intro, because that's true. If a lot of people say, the end of the first paragraph. Intro does not necessarily mean the end of the first paragraph. Introduction is when you introduce all the necessary concepts by which somebody can understand the arguments that will be made. Now, in this particular case, he recognized in order to properly segment things and keep it organized, I need to talk about the problem, which is hypocrisy, then reframe the minister's black veil in the way that I need to talk about it while focusing on the townsfolk. So he summarized it in that way in its own paragraph. To keep me from getting confused, he put the Westboro Baptist Church in its own paragraph and explained who they are and what they do and how they're kind of like the townsfolk, but he hasn't mentioned that yet. Then finally, once he's introduced all the necessary concepts, which are hypocrisy, the story, and the real-world issue, which is the Westboro Baptist Church, now he can give me the thesis. So it's the fourth paragraph in the first sentence, but he's introduced all the necessary concepts before giving me the thesis, so it works. And rather than read to you the whole paper, which I'm not going to do right now, I actually did something I didn't mean to do, which was to talk to you about the way he structured the paper first. I meant to tell you about that in a minute. I want to first show you how I will approach grading one of these papers. Let's say that I start on page 1, okay, and I get to this on the viewer. Well, I'm going to scroll right down to the works cited page first. And what I'm going to do first is make sure he's internally cited. First, I'm going to make sure he's got a works cited page with a number of sources, yes. Now I'm going to make sure he's internally cited every single one of these before I actually start reading a word of it. So I'm going to hit Control F here. I'm going to look for Barrett. Yep, he cited Barrett. What about Boone? Yep, that one's cited. That's 2. What about Ferris? Yep, that's 3. What about Friedman? Yep, that's 4. What about, okay, I already saw minister's black veil was mentioned, so Hawthorne's covered. What about the Bible? Yes, you're curious, aren't you? Johnson.
Wait, the Bible counts as a source?
I will explain that to you. Johnson.
I'm gonna do that.
I'm gonna do that.
Yeah. You're gonna have at least 3 people to do
Let's see. So he cited every one of his sources to make sure that he's got at least one on minister's black veil. Yes. At least a couple on the Westboro Baptist Church. So there's one on Westboro Baptist Church. Yes, Westboro Baptist Church. There we go. So he's got articles covering the literature, articles covering the news event, and he's got internally cited all of them. So now I will start reading. Now after reading, he does a great job on his conclusion, so I'm just going to skip to it. He says the townsfolk in the minister's black veil and Westboro Baptist Church resemble each other because they both fail to directly comply with their faith that they claim to have profound morality for. Both blatantly judge others around them and continually try to play the role of God. Despite the fact that the Bible, their source of faith, specifically states that only God can determine the fate of people, both the townsfolk and the Westboro Baptist Church choose to ignore it on several occasions. This not only makes a mockery out of the religion that's followed, but also creates hypocrisy. He also forgets to mention that they act inappropriately at functions where you would act appropriately. The townsfolk and ministers black veil, they gossip at funerals, which are meant to be reverent things. And in Westboro Baptist Church, they hold up God hates fags signs at military funerals when people are trying to grieve, which is also an inappropriate action.
They held up signs at a Leonard Nimoy's funeral.
That's ridiculous. And so he actually cites verses from the Bible. He cites, do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. He also cites, there is only one lawgiver and judge, he's who's able to save and destroy, but who are you to judge your neighbor? Now, the Westboro Baptist Church is specifically a church. So you know that their set of rules is going to be probably the Bible or some creed. Additionally, in the minister's black veil, it's specifically talking about the relationship between the minister and his townsfolk, but also specifically his church. So you have two instances of churches being talked about. Now, why he's able to cite the Bible specifically is both of these groups of people use the Bible as their rule book. And both are claiming to follow their rule book and holding that over others, while simultaneously not following one of the rules within it. So not following the rules that you hold other people accountable for, that's the definition of hypocrisy. So he's able to prove that they're being hypocrites to their own religion, both groups. Now, if you read this paper, I'll tell you straight up, you would not know whether the student who wrote this is religious. And you shouldn't. I can tell he knows a lot about Christianity. I can't tell whether he's personally a Christian. And that's how it should be. It should be an objective look. And that's how he's able to get away with using the Bible as a source, because he's not arguing whether they're right to follow the Bible. He's just arguing that they're hypocrites by not following the Bible that they claim to follow. So he's not really saying, I believe this because of Jesus, which is still a problematic, issue that I have, in a paper. But he says these people aren't following Jesus as they claim to, therefore they're hypocrites, and that's the definition of hypocrisy. So it works. So yes, y'all could also do that, but keep that in mind. It's not just gonna be like, let's throw the Bible into every paper. Killings, thou shalt not kill. There's no real church in there, so it'll be a little difficult to get away with. I did update all the citations to MLA 8th edition and tried to give you a nice collection of academic journals from the Search Complete and from Opposing Viewpoints. This is a print version of the Bible cited. And I want you to note here, last thing I'll say, and we'll go into detail on all this other stuff and more another time, but Nathaniel Hawthorne wrote Minister's Black Veil in the Bedford Introduction to Literature, which is edited by Michael Meyer. I know it's tempting when you look at this big fat book to say, who wrote my story? Oh, Michael Meyer wrote my story. Michael Meyer wrote Minister's Black Veil. That's not true. This is why in all bold caps I say Michael Meyer is not the author of your literary work, and I will completely lose my mind if I see that you claim Michael Meyer was the author of your story poem, because he most certainly was not. Oh yes, East of Eden. Michael Meyer's great East of Eden. This is not true. Michael Meyer wrote War and Peace. Apparently Michael Meyer is the author of so many stories I never realized. Every semester I get research papers. So please recognize who the author of your story is and do so accordingly. Start thinking about it if you have time. If not, wait till you come back. Use the break for what it's used for, which is a break. Y'all have a great spring break, and have a happy day. I don't know why I said and, so I had to come up with something.
Because you go with it.